The unconquerable general. The terror of the frontier. General Vexthor of the Crythian Empire stood 7 feet tall, covered in crimson scales that had never known defeat. For 20 years, he had conquered world after world, his military genius unmatched across 50 star systems. His name alone made entire planets surrender before his fleet even arrived. The Crythian war machine was perfect. Every battle planned with mathematical precision. Every enemy weakness exploited without mercy. Vexthor's campaigns were studied in military academies across the galaxy as examples of flawless strategy. He had never lost a single engagement. But conquest, Vexthor had discovered, was exhausting. The unexpected assignment. The trouble began when Vexthor's physicians detected something alarming during his annual medical scan. His stress levels were dangerously high. His combat effectiveness was declining. The Emperor himself issued a direct order: take a mandatory rest period on the newly conquered human colony of New Terra, or face forced retirement. Vexthor protested. He argued. He even threatened to resign his commission. But the Emperor was firm. The Empire needed their greatest general healthy, not burned out. So Vexthor found himself on a transport to New Terra, fuming with barely contained rage. "This is ridiculous," he growled to his aide, a nervous Crythian lieutenant named Sark. "I am a warrior, not some soft civilian who needs vacation time." "The Emperor's orders are absolute, sir," Sark replied carefully. "Perhaps it will be good for you to experience one of our conquered worlds at peace." Vexthor snorted. Peace was boring. Peace was for the weak. The human colony. New Terra was a small agricultural world that had surrendered to the Empire without firing a shot. The humans here had no military, no weapons, no desire for conflict. They simply grew food and lived quiet lives. It was, in Vexthor's opinion, pathetic. The Empire had set up a small administrative center in the colony's main settlement, a town called Riverside. Vexthor was assigned quarters in a building that overlooked the human marketplace. It was clean, comfortable, and utterly beneath a warrior of his status. "I could be planning the invasion of the Telvari system," Vexthor complained, staring out his window at the peaceful streets below. "Instead, I'm watching farmers sell vegetables." The humans seemed unbothered by the Crythian presence. They went about their business, talking and laughing, completely unconcerned that their world had been conquered. This confused Vexthor. Where was the fear? The resentment? The barely suppressed hatred that conquerors deserved? An unexpected encounter. On his 3rd morning in Riverside, Vexthor decided to inspect the marketplace personally. Perhaps understanding these humans better would make this tedious assignment pass faster. He wore his full military uniform, every medal and decoration displayed, his posture radiating authority and power. The humans noticed him, certainly. But instead of fear or hostility, they simply nodded politely and continued with their shopping. Some even smiled. Smiled. As if a Crythian general was just another neighbor. Vexthor was walking past a small building labeled Mama Chen's Kitchen when an aroma hit him like a physical force. It was unlike anything he had ever smelled. Rich, complex, inviting. His stomach, which had been surviving on military rations for 2 decades, suddenly reminded him it existed. Before he could stop himself, Vexthor's feet carried him toward the source of that incredible smell. Inside, the kitchen was small and crowded with humans eating at simple tables. The walls were covered with pictures and handwritten notes. At the back, behind a counter, a short, elderly human woman worked at a stove, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this for many years. "Sit anywhere you like, honey," she called without turning around. Menus on the table. Coffee's fresh. Vexthor stood frozen in the doorway. Had this human just called him honey? Did she not know who he was? What he had done? Mama Chen. The old woman turned around, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at Vexthor with warm brown eyes that showed no trace of fear. "Oh, you're a big one, aren't you? First time here?" "I am General Vexthor of the Crythian Empire," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I have conquered 50 worlds. That's nice, dear, Mama-chan said pleasantly. What would you like to eat? Dexthor blinked. Had she just dismissed his achievements as nice? What is that smell? That's my breakfast special. Scrambled eggs with herbs, fresh bread, bacon, and fried potatoes. You look like you could use a good meal. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't gray and came from a packet? Dexthor wanted to be offended. He wanted to remind this human of her place in the new order. Instead, he heard himself say, yesterday. And the day before that. And every day for the past 20 years. Mama-chan's face softened. Then you definitely need real food. Sit down. I'll bring you something special. Still confused by this entire interaction, Dexthor sat at a small table near the window. The chair was designed for humans and barely accommodated his large frame. Around him, other humans continued eating and talking, occasionally glancing at him with curiosity but no fear. The meal that changed everything. When Mama-chan brought out his plate, Dexthor stared at it in wonder. The eggs were fluffy and golden, flecked with green herbs. The bread was still warm, releasing steam when he broke it open. The bacon was crispy and glistening. The potatoes were perfectly browned. Go on, Mama-chan encouraged. It's not going to eat itself. Dexthor picked up the human eating utensils awkwardly. His first bite of eggs was a revelation. Flavor exploded in his mouth, savory, rich, with hints of something green and fresh. He had never tasted anything like it. He ate slowly at first, then faster. The bread was soft inside and crispy outside. The bacon had a smoky flavor that made his taste buds sing. The potatoes were seasoned with something that made them addictive. When his plate was empty, Dexthor sat back in his chair, stunned. For the first time in 20 years, he felt satisfied. Not just fed, but truly satisfied. Mama-chan refilled his coffee cup. Better? What did you do to this food? Dexthor demanded. Is there some human chemical that makes it addictive? Mama-chan laughed, a warm sound that reminded Dexthor of things he had forgotten. It's called cooking, honey. Real cooking, with care and good ingredients. Not that processed military stuff. I have eaten on 100 worlds, Dexthor said slowly. I have never tasted anything like this. That's because you've been eating to survive, not eating to live, Mama-chan said, sitting down across from him. There's a difference. An unusual conversation. I am a conqueror, Dexthor said, feeling the need to reassert his identity. I have destroyed armies. I have broken civilizations. And now you're eating breakfast in my kitchen, Mama-chan replied calmly. Life's funny that way. You should fear me. Should I? Mama-chan studied him with those gentle eyes. You look more tired than scary to me. When's the last time you slept properly? Or laughed? Or did anything besides giving orders and planning battles? Dexthor opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He couldn't remember. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I have a duty, he said finally. The Empire requires. The Empire required you to take a break, Mama-chan interrupted gently. Maybe listen to them. Your body's trying to tell you something, and it took your Emperor noticing before you would. What do you know about duty? Dexthor snapped. You're just a what? A conquered human? A simple cook? Mama-chan smiled. I raised 4 children, ran this kitchen for 40 years, kept this community fed through droughts and hard times. I know plenty about duty, General. But I also know that duty without rest is just slow suicide. The return. Dexthor left Mama-chan's kitchen feeling unsettled. The old human had spoken to him like he was just another person, not the feared General Dexthor. And somehow, that simple meal had affected him more than any battle ever had. That night, he slept better than he had in years. He dreamed not of conquest, but of fresh bread and golden eggs. The next morning, Dexthor found himself walking back to Mama Chen's kitchen. And the morning after that. And the one after that. Each time, Mama Chen prepared something different. Pancakes with sweet syrup. Omelets with cheese and vegetables. French toast with fruit. And each time, they talked. Not about war or conquest, but about simple things. About her grandchildren. About the recipes she learned from her mother. About the garden she kept behind the kitchen. You know what your problem is? Mama Chen said one morning while Dexthor was enjoying what she called a breakfast burrito. You've spent so long being General Dexthor the Conqueror that you forgot how to be just Dexthor the person. There is no difference, Dexthor insisted. I am my duty. Is that why you're here every morning, eating breakfast and chatting with an old lady? Mama Chen raised an eyebrow. Seems to me there's a person in there who's tired of war and hungry for something more than victory. Dexthor had no answer to that, the warrior's transformation. A different kind of battle. By the second week, something strange was happening. Dexthor found himself actually looking forward to breakfast at Mama Chen's kitchen. Not just for the food, though that was extraordinary, but for the conversation. For the way Mama Chen treated him like a regular person instead of a military legend. Other humans started acknowledging him too. A farmer named John began nodding good morning. A shopkeeper named Sarah occasionally asked how he was doing. Slowly, Dexthor was becoming part of the community's morning routine. This confused him deeply. He had conquered these people. By all rights, they should hate him. Instead, they were, including him? Why don't you humans resist? Dexthor asked Mama Chen one morning over what she called biscuits and gravy. Your world was taken by force. You have every right to fight back. Mama Chen stirred her coffee thoughtfully. What would fighting get us? More death? Destroyed homes? We looked at the Empire's history. You don't lose battles, General. Fighting you would just mean our children died for nothing. So you surrendered out of cowardice? We surrendered out of wisdom, Mama Chen corrected gently. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose peace over pride. We kept our families safe. We kept our homes. We still grow our crops and live our lives. The Empire's flag flies over the town hall, but our children still laugh and play. That's not defeat, General. That's survival. Dexthor pondered this while eating. In 20 years of conquest, no one had ever framed surrender as a victory before. But listening to Mama Chen, it almost made sense. The teaching begins. You know what you need? Mama Chen announced one morning. You need to learn how to cook. Dexthor nearly dropped his coffee cup. I am a military general. I don't cook. Exactly your problem. You only know how to destroy things. Time you learned how to create something. She stood up decisively. Tomorrow morning, come early. We're going to make pancakes. This is absurd. This is an order, Mama Chen said with a smile. Consider it part of your mandatory rest period. The Emperor said you need to relax. Can't think of anything more relaxing than cooking. The next morning, Dexthor found himself standing in Mama Chen's kitchen at dawn, wearing an apron that barely fit his large frame. Several regular customers were already waiting, excited to watch the famous General Dexthor learn to cook. First rule, Mama Chen said, handing him a bowl. Cooking is about patience and care. You can't rush it. You have to respect the ingredients and the process. Dexthor, who had commanded armies across 50 worlds, found himself struggling to crack an egg properly. His first 3 attempts ended with shell fragments in the bowl and yolk on his hands. The watching humans didn't mock him. Instead, an old farmer named Tom called out, "Don't worry, General. Took me a month to learn that trick. You'll get it." By his 5th attempt, Dexthor successfully cracked an egg. The small crowd in the kitchen actually applauded. He felt something unfamiliar, pride in a simple, peaceful accomplishment. Lessons beyond cooking. As weeks passed, Dexthor's cooking skills slowly improved. He learned to make scrambled eggs without burning them. He mastered the art of flipping pancakes. He even began experimenting with seasonings, discovering he had a natural talent for balancing flavors. But more importantly, he learned other things. He learned that creating something was harder than destroying it. He learned that patience was a different kind of strength than aggression. He learned that conversation with regular people was more refreshing than strategic briefings. "You're smiling more," Mama Chen observed one morning while Dexthor practiced making omelets. "Didn't think that face could smile." "I am not smiling," Dexthor protested, even though he was. "Sure, honey. Whatever you say." She watched him work for a moment. "You know, you're actually pretty good at this. You have the discipline and attention to detail. Just needed to apply it to something other than war." Dexthor plated his omelet carefully. He had learned that presentation mattered, that food should appeal to the eye as well as the stomach. He garnished it with herbs the way Mama Chen had taught him. "There," Mama Chen said approvingly. "That's restaurant quality. You should be proud." Proud of cooking an omelet. 6 weeks ago, Dexthor would have found the concept laughable. Now, looking at the perfectly folded eggs on the plate, he actually felt a sense of accomplishment. The challenge. Dexthor's mandatory rest period was nearly over when disaster struck. A message arrived from Empire headquarters. They were sending an inspection team to evaluate New Terra's integration into the Empire. If the colony wasn't meeting standards, it would face stricter controls and possibly military occupation. The news spread through Riverside like wildfire. The humans, who had been living peacefully under minimal Empire oversight, now faced the prospect of real oppression. "They'll bring in military administrators," the colony's human liaison explained at an emergency meeting. "Strict curfews, heavy regulations, constant surveillance. Everything we've avoided so far." Dexthor attended the meeting, uncomfortable in civilian clothes Mama Chen had convinced him to buy. He listened as the humans discussed their options. There was no talk of resistance or rebellion. Only worried conversation about how to make the best impression on the inspection team. "What about you, General?" Sarah the shopkeeper asked. "You know how the Empire thinks. What can we do?" All eyes turned to Dexthor. For the first time in his life, he felt torn. His duty was to the Empire, but these people had become familiar. Almost friends. "Show them your strength," Dexthor said finally. "Not military strength. Your real strength. Your community, your productivity, your peace." "Will that be enough?" John the farmer asked. "I don't know," Dexthor admitted. "But it's the truth of who you are." The inspection. The inspection team arrived 3 days later, a group of cold, efficient Crithian administrators who saw only numbers and reports. They were unimpressed by Riverside's peaceful integration, calling it weak enforcement of imperial standards. The lead inspector, a stern Crithian named Vorth, was particularly critical. "This colony has been allowed too much freedom. We see humans walking freely, conducting business as if they weren't conquered. This sets a bad precedent. They're productive and peaceful," Dexthor found himself arguing. "Isn't that the goal of integration?" "The goal is obedience," Vorth replied coldly. "Fear and control. This colony lacks both." That evening, Dexthor did something unprecedented. He invited the inspection team to breakfast at Mama Chen's kitchen. "This is highly irregular," Vorth protested. "Consider it part of your evaluation," Dexthor said. "You should see all aspects of the colony." Breaking bread. The next morning, 5 skeptical Crithian inspectors sat uncomfortably in Mama Chen's kitchen. The human customers had been warned to stay away, but Mama Chen herself was there, cooking with Dexthor's assistance. "What is this?" Vorth demanded as plates of food arrived. "We didn't come here to eat human food. You came to evaluate this colony's value to the Empire," Dexthor replied. "This is part of that value." The inspectors ate reluctantly at first. Then one by one, their expressions changed. The food was simply too good to resist. Even Vorth, stern and unyielding, found himself reaching for a second helping of pancakes. The humans here have skills worth preserving, Vexthor explained while the inspectors ate. They're productive, peaceful, and they've integrated smoothly. Heavy-handed control would destroy what makes them valuable. You've gone soft, Vorth accused, but his mouth was full of bacon. I've learned the difference between crushing an enemy and managing a resource, Vexthor corrected. These humans aren't a threat. They're an asset. Why waste military resources controlling people who control themselves? Mama Chen brought out fresh coffee. She poured for each inspector with the same warmth she showed everyone. More pancakes, gentlemen? Vorth stared at her, then at his empty plate, then at Vexthor. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, perhaps. Or at least the beginning of it. The recommendation. The inspection team left New Terra 3 days later. Their report, to everyone's surprise, recommended continuing the current approach. Riverside was designated a model colony showing successful peaceful integration. How did you convince them? The human liaison asked Vexthor. Breakfast, Vexthor replied with a slight smile. Never underestimate the power of a good meal. When his rest period officially ended, Vexthor received orders to return to military duty. A new campaign was being planned. The Empire needed their greatest general back. But something had changed. Vexthor stood in Mama Chen's kitchen early one morning, watching the sunrise through the window. He wore his military uniform again, every medal back in place. But it felt different now. Heavier. You don't want to go, Mama Chen observed, bringing him his usual coffee. I have a duty. You have a choice, she corrected. Duty is important, but it shouldn't cost you your soul. You've spent 2 months here learning to create instead of destroy. Learning to be a person instead of just a weapon. You going to throw all that away? Vexthor was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the kitchen that morning. He removed his military medals one by one and set them on the table. I'm requesting retirement, he announced. Effective immediately. A new purpose. The Empire granted Vexthor's retirement request. After 20 years of perfect service, even the Emperor couldn't deny him the right to step down. There was confusion, certainly. Rumors spread across the Empire about the great General Vexthor who had given up military glory to stay on a conquered human world. But Vexthor didn't care about rumors anymore. He had found something more important than conquest, purpose without destruction. He partnered with Mama Chen, learning everything she would teach him about cooking. Together, they expanded the kitchen, training other humans and even curious Crithians in the art of real cooking. Within a year, graduates from Mama Chen's kitchen were opening restaurants across the Empire. Food became a form of diplomacy, breaking down barriers between species that warfare had only reinforced. 5 years later, Vexthor stood in a kitchen 3 times larger than the original, teaching a mixed class of humans and Crithians how to make what he called integration bread, a recipe that combined ingredients from both cultures. The key, he told his students, is respect. For the ingredients, for the process, for each other. You can't rush it. You can't force it. You have to be patient and let it rise naturally. Mama Chen, now in her 80s and officially retired, watched from a chair by the window. Never thought I'd see the day when the Empire's greatest warrior became a baker. Former warrior, Vexthor corrected with a smile. I conquered 50 worlds. But you conquered me with breakfast. Best victory I ever won, Mama Chen replied. The legacy. The story of General Vexthor and Mama Chen spread across the Empire. It became a legend of sorts, the warrior who laid down his weapons to pick up a spatula. Some military leaders scoffed at it. But others saw something deeper, a new way of thinking about conquest and integration. Emperor himself eventually visited Riverside. He sat in Mama Chen's kitchen, now called Mama Chen and General Vex, and ate the famous breakfast that had transformed his greatest general. When he left, he issued a new directive: all occupied worlds would be evaluated not just on compliance, but on cultural preservation and integration. It wasn't perfect. Wars still happened. The Empire still conquered. But something had shifted. The idea that strength could exist without destruction, that victory could come without violence, had taken root. Vexthor never returned to military service. He spent the rest of his days teaching cooking, creating community, and proving that warriors could become builders. He found more satisfaction in feeding people than he ever had in defeating them. On the morning of his death, 30 years after that first breakfast, Vexthor was in the kitchen preparing pancakes for a group of young students. He collapsed peacefully, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and the sound of laughter. At his funeral, representatives came from across the Empire. But it was the simple humans of Riverside who mourned most deeply, because they had known him not as General Vexthor the Conqueror, but as Vex, their friend who made the best omelets in the galaxy. Mama Chen, now ancient but still sharp, gave the eulogy. He conquered 50 worlds as a warrior. But he saved one soul as a cook. And in the end, that was the victory that mattered most. The kitchen remained open, run by Vexthor's students. Above the door, a sign was placed: where warriors become cooks, and conquest becomes creation. And every morning, as the sun rose over Riverside, the kitchen filled with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of species from across the galaxy learning that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in fighting, but in feeding. In creating instead of destroying. In building community instead of empires. All because one tired general accepted an invitation to breakfast and discovered that real victory tastes like scrambled eggs with herbs, fresh bread, crispy bacon, and coffee shared with friends.